Should you go gluten-free? It's really interesting because the gluten-free fad has actually been kind of successful in introducing consumers to a wider variety of grains besides just wheat. But there are still some confused consumers who think that avoiding gluten will solve all their problems, uh, and that simply isn't the case. In a study published in 2017, researchers analyzed data from 10 studies in which over 1,000 adults who had self-diagnosed as gluten sensitive were tested for their reaction to gluten. So in these 10 double-blind, placebo-controlled gluten challenges, where neither the researchers nor the participants knew if they were getting a gluten-free diet or a gluten-containing control or placebo, only 16% of the patients showed gluten-specific symptoms when exposed to the gluten-containing diet, and 40% of them had similar or increased symptoms when on the gluten-free control diet. So, in other words, what this tells us is that gluten itself is probably not the culprit in most people who think they're gluten sensitive. And, by self-treating with a gluten-free diet, it may keep other important health issues from being addressed. If people aren't feeling well, it's important for them to talk to their medical team to get to the root of the problem, because it may not be exactly what they think it is. Self-treating with a gluten-free diet before undergoing testing for celiac disease is actually going to interfere with the test. You really do need to be eating a gluten-containing diet to be properly diagnosed. So that's another thing to just, if you're suspecting some type of medical issue, it's good to have that conversation with your healthcare team. Other studies have found that avoiding gluten may increase the risk for heart disease if people avoid whole grains. This is because a lot of gluten-free foods also tend to have more sugar than their gluten-containing counterparts. There's a cool article, if you look it up, from Consumer Reports, where they kind of compared like gluten-containing products to the gluten-free counterparts. And yeah, a lot of the gluten-free versions, unfortunately, did have more sugar and other things like that, I think, to mimic the texture of a gluten-containing product. And lastly, it's important to remember that gluten-free does not equal grain-free, and that most whole grains, such as these listed in the yellow box, are naturally gluten-free. If you're writing for an audience that does need to be on a gluten-free diet, there are tons of options, actually. Amaranth, buckwheat, millet, quinoa, even common things too, like oats or rice. And we do put oats, we put a little asterisk here because they are sometimes cross-contaminated during processing. So that's a good thing, just to check the label and make sure that they say gluten-free oats. Oats don't inherently have gluten in them, but they do tend to be processed on the same facilities and grown near wheat as well.